I found out my home was sold while I was still recovering. A few days later, everything I thought I owned felt uncertain. It was my parents who handled it. The place was worth about $3,000. I was in surgery when the papers were signed. At first, I wondered if I had misunderstood something. I kept trying to do the math in my head and it did not line up, and that is where things stopped making sense. I will explain how it unfolded. I had gone into the hospital for a procedure that was supposed to be routine, nothing dramatic, something scheduled weeks in advance. I remember filling out forms and joking with a nurse about the food. Then the anesthesia hit and everything went quiet. When I woke up, I was groggy and sore and mostly focused on breathing through the discomfort. My phone was on the side table, but I did not reach for it right away. I was told to rest. So I did. The first message I saw later that evening was from my mother. It was short. She said not to worry and that we would talk soon. That should have been comforting. Somehow it was not. The next day I checked my email. There was a notification from a bank I did not expect to hear from. It mentioned a completed transaction. At first I assumed it was spam or some automatic thing. I closed it and told myself I was tired. Later that afternoon my father called. His voice sounded careful, not upset. Just careful. He asked how I was feeling. Then he said there had been a decision made while I was unavailable. That phrase stuck with me. Unavailable. I asked him what decision. He paused. Then he said they had finalized the sale of the condo. The one I had been living in. The one in my name. Or at least I thought it was. I did not know what to say. I remember staring at the wall and noticing a crack near the ceiling. I had seen it 100 times before. For some reason it felt important in that moment. I told him there must be some mistake. He said there was not. He said the paperwork had already gone through. He said it was done efficiently to avoid delays. To be honest, I kept waiting for him to explain why he had the authority to do that. He never did. I asked how it was possible without me there. He said they had handled similar things before. He said they were just trying to help. He said I would understand once I was feeling better. That is when it hit me. I started replaying old conversations in my head. Times they had insisted on holding documents for safekeeping. Times they said it was easier if everything stayed centralized. I had agreed, because it felt practical. Because they were my parents. Something about it did not sit right. I asked where the money was. He said it was being managed. I asked managed by who. He said we would talk about it later. We did not talk about it later. After the call ended, I lay back and tried to breathe normally. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself I might be missing details. I told myself there could be a reasonable explanation. Still, the numbers did not leave my head. If the condo was sold and I was not involved, then what exactly did I own anymore? And why did it feel like I was the last person to know? I stayed in the hospital 2 more nights. The pain was manageable, but my thoughts were not. Nurses came and went. Friends texted. I answered when I could. I did not mention the call with my father. I was not ready to hear it out loud. When I got home, my apartment felt unfamiliar. Not empty exactly. Just paused. My keys still worked. My clothes were still there. But the place felt like it was waiting for someone else. I checked the folder where I kept copies of my documents. It was thinner than I remembered. The deed was not there. Neither was the power of attorney I vaguely recalled signing years earlier. I sat on the floor and tried to remember when that happened. I could not. I called my mother this time. She sounded relieved that I was home. She said the sale had closed cleanly. She said the buyer was already arranging inspections. She said it was better this way because markets change quickly. I asked why they did not wait. She said waiting would have complicated things. I asked whose name was on the sale. She said it was handled. That was her answer to everything. I asked about the money again. She said it was being held temporarily to cover expenses. She said medical bills were expensive. She said they were protecting me from stress. I did not argue. I wrote things down instead. Dates, amounts, names she mentioned casually. I noticed she avoided saying exact numbers. She kept rounding. That bothered me more than I expected. A day later I called the title company. I did not accuse anyone. I just asked questions. The woman on the line was polite and careful. She confirmed the sale amount. $350,000 before fees. She confirmed signatures were accepted under authority. Authority I apparently granted. I hung up and sat quietly. There was a moment where I considered letting it go. I told myself they were older. I told myself they had experience. I told myself family does not usually do things like this without reason. Then I thought about the timing. They chose the one window where I could not object, where I could not ask questions, where I could not even be awake. That realization did not come with anger. It came with clarity. I opened my laptop and checked a separate account I rarely use, one I had set up years earlier after a small inheritance from my grandfather. It had not been touched. The balance was exactly what I expected. That is when I remembered the other property. I had never mentioned it to them. I had bought that second house quietly. It was not a secret on purpose. It just never came up. A small place outside the city, nothing fancy. I bought it after my grandfather passed and left me a modest amount. I wanted something stable. Something that was mine without shared opinions. I never moved into it. I rented it out through a management company. Rent came in. Taxes went out. It stayed boring. That was the point. As I thought about it more, I realized how different that process had been. No one held papers for me. No one suggested shortcuts. I signed everything myself. I showed up. I paid attention. That contrast mattered. A few days later my parents came by. They brought food I could not eat yet. They sat at the kitchen table like nothing had changed. My mother talked about traffic. My father commented on the light in the room. Eventually my father mentioned the condo again. He said they were relieved it was resolved. He said it would give me flexibility. I asked what that meant. He said not having property tied up was freeing. I asked where the money was again. He said some of it had already been allocated. He said there were obligations. He did not say whose. I asked to see the account. That was the first time the tone shifted. He said that was unnecessary. He said trust mattered. He said families do not audit each other. I did not push back right away. I asked a different question instead. I asked how they knew I did not need that condo. They both paused. My mother said we assumed you would stay with us if needed. She said that is what family does. My father nodded like the answer was obvious. I told him I had another place. The room went quiet. I explained it simply. I said I bought it years ago. I said it was rented. I said it was in my name only. I did not add anything else. My mother asked why I never told them. I said no one had asked. My father looked down at the table. He did not speak for a long time. When he did, he said that complicated things. I asked how. He said nothing more. They left not long after. There was no argument, no raised voices. Just a sense that something had shifted and could not shift back. That night, I locked my laptop and put the documents somewhere else. I changed passwords. I called the bank the next morning and requested full statements. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer, not because I wanted to fight, because I needed to understand what had happened to me. I am still putting pieces together. Some questions remain unanswered. Some conversations never happened. The condo is gone. That part is final. What stayed with me was the realization that being quiet had been mistaken for consent. And that is something I no longer assume people understand. The lawyer meeting was set for the following Tuesday. That gave me 4 days to sit with everything. I kept replaying the same details over and over. Not the sale itself. The tone. The timing. The way certain words were chosen. It felt like the story had been rehearsed without me. I gathered what documents I still had. Old emails. Bank statements. Anything with dates. I noticed how often my parents had been copied on things that did not really concern them. At the time it felt normal. Looking back it felt unnecessary. The lawyer was calm, middle-aged, no rush in the way he spoke. He asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I tried to keep it factual. I avoided emotional language. I did not want to sound dramatic. He listened without interrupting. When I finished he asked one question. Did you give them power of attorney? I said yes. I thought so. Years ago, for emergencies. He nodded slowly. He asked if there were limits written into it. I did not know. I had never asked. He explained that broad authority can be used legally even if it feels wrong later. He said intent matters emotionally but not always legally. He said timing can look bad without being illegal. That was hard to hear. He asked if I had copies of the signed document. I said no. He said we could request them. He said it might take time. Then he asked something unexpected. He asked what outcome I wanted. I did not answer right away. I realized I had not thought that far. I was still trying to understand the past. I had not planned the future. I said I wanted clarity. I said I wanted to know where the money was. I said I wanted to prevent it from happening again. He said those were reasonable goals. He suggested starting with formal requests, not accusations. He said to document everything. He said not to confront emotionally. He said facts travel better than feelings. After the meeting I sat in my car for a long time. I did not feel angry. I felt foolish. I thought about how often I had deferred decisions because it was easier, how often I let them speak for me in rooms I was not in. I told myself it was respect or efficiency. Maybe it was avoidance. That night my mother called. She said the lawyer was unnecessary. She said it made things complicated. She said people would misunderstand. I asked who people were. She said banks, advisors, family. I asked again about the funds. She said they were safe. She said they were planning next steps. I asked to see statements. She said that felt hostile. There it was, not anger, not denial. Just the idea that my questions were the problem. I told her I needed transparency going forward. I said it calmly. I did not raise my voice. I said I would follow up in writing. She sighed. She said we would talk later. We did not. The next morning I sent a formal email. Simple language. Clear requests. No blame. I asked for copies of all documents used in the sale. I asked for a full accounting of proceeds. I did not CC anyone. I waited. The response came 2 days later. It was shorter than my message. My father wrote that they needed time. He said records were being gathered. He said I should focus on healing. He signed it with love. That word felt heavy. I forwarded the email to the lawyer. He replied with one line, document everything, keep timelines. So I did. I created a folder. I saved every message. I wrote notes after phone calls, dates, exact phrases, long pauses, what was said, and what was not. Around that time I received a notice from the Condo Association. It was addressed to the new owner. Forwarded to me by mistake. I stared at the name for a while before opening it. Someone else now had a mailbox where mine used to be. That made it real in a way nothing else had. I drove past the building a few days later. I did not go inside. I did not park. I just slowed down at the light and looked. The windows were dark. It felt strange knowing I no longer belonged there. That night my parents showed up without calling. They said they wanted to clear the air. My mother said the email felt cold. My father said lawyers changed the tone of things. I said I was trying to understand what had happened. My father said they had acted in my best interest. He said decisions had to be made quickly. He said he did not think I would object. I asked why. He said I usually did not. That landed harder than I expected. My mother said they assumed I trusted them. She said involving professionals suggested I did not. She said it hurt. I listened. I did not interrupt. Then I asked one question. I asked how much was left. They exchanged a look. My father said the exact amount was complicated. He said there had been transfers. He said some obligations were addressed. He said we would go through it together eventually. I asked again. Slower this time. He gave a number. It was lower than I expected. I did not react right away. I asked what obligations meant. He said family expenses. He said support. He said things I had benefited from indirectly. I asked for a breakdown. My mother said this was becoming transactional. I said money already was. There was a silence that felt different from the others. Not careful. Not polite. Just empty. My father said if I pushed this further it could damage relationships. He said people would take sides. He said things could get messy. I said I was not trying to punish anyone. I said I needed to protect myself. He said from who? I did not answer. After they left, I realized something small but important. They had never said they were sorry. Not once. The lawyer called the next morning. He had received partial documents. He said some details were still missing. He said we could formally request them. He also said something else. He said situations like this often reveal patterns rather than mistakes. That stayed with me. I spent the next few weeks untangling details instead of emotions. Statements arrived slowly, some were incomplete, some contradicted earlier explanations. Transfers moved through accounts I had never heard of. Each answer created another question. Nothing dramatic, just enough inconsistency to keep me alert. The lawyer helped me separate what felt wrong from what could be proven. He explained that not every unfair thing is illegal. He also explained that silence often fills gaps people hope no one will notice. That made sense. I noticed how my parents started communicating differently. Shorter messages, fewer details. They stopped calling and started texting. When I asked direct questions, the replies became general. When I asked for timelines, they talked about intention. We were no longer having the same conversation. One afternoon my mother sent a message saying she missed how things used to be. She said everything felt strained now. She said she wished I would stop focusing on paperwork and remember we were family. I read it several times. I did not reply right away. Later that night I drafted a response and deleted it. Then I wrote another. I deleted that too. Eventually I sent something simple. I said I needed clarity before comfort. I said trust works better when it is mutual. She did not respond. Around that time the rental property needed a repair. A plumbing issue. The management company handled it and sent me the invoice. I paid it online and filed the receipt. It was ordinary, predictable. That ordinariness felt grounding. I realized I was not trying to recover what was lost. I was trying to understand the system that allowed it to happen. Not just legally. Personally. I had given access because it was easier. I had avoided asking questions because it felt impolite. I had confused proximity with protection. That realization did not come with blame. It came with adjustment. I updated my documents. I limited authority. I changed beneficiaries. I set rules that required my presence, not as punishment, as structure. When my parents eventually asked if we could move on, I said I was open to rebuilding. I also said rebuilding needs boundaries. I said those boundaries were not temporary. They did not argue. They did not agree either. Time passed. Conversations became occasional, neutral, practical. Holidays were quieter. Nothing exploded, nothing resolved. The money situation remains partially unclear. Some records are still missing. The condo is still gone. The second house remains untouched. What I gained was not peace. It was awareness. I now know how easily things can be decided for you when you are not in the room, and I make sure I am always in the room now. I was back at work part-time. My health had stabilized. Bills were paid. Nothing urgent was breaking. That made it harder to explain why I felt so alert all the time. Every decision now ran through a different filter. Who has access to this? Who benefits from silence? Who speaks for me when I am not there? I noticed it first with small things, bank calls, insurance renewals, even package deliveries. I started asking more questions than I used to. Sometimes the person on the other end sounded surprised. Sometimes relieved. I was surprised too. My parents and I spoke less. Not dramatically less, just fewer spontaneous calls, fewer assumptions that I would agree. When we did talk, the conversation stayed surface level: health, weather, distant relatives. The condo was never mentioned. One afternoon I received a message from my father asking if we could meet. Just the two of us. He said it would be easier to talk in person. I did not answer right away. I sat with that request for a full day. When we met, he looked older than I remembered, not weak, just slower. He ordered coffee and waited for me to sit before speaking. He said he wanted things to feel normal again. I asked what normal meant. He said before lawyers and emails and paperwork. I said before surgery too. He nodded. He said he wished things had happened differently. He did not say he regretted what he did. He said circumstances forced decisions. He said he acted as a parent. I asked him if he would do it again. He hesitated. Then he said he would still protect me. That answer told me more than he realized. I told him I was not asking for protection anymore. I was asking for permission to manage my own life. He said that sounded harsh. I said it sounded accurate. We sat in silence after that. Not angry silence. Just space filling itself. When we stood to leave, he asked if this meant distance. I said it meant clarity. He nodded like he understood. I was not sure he did. In the weeks that followed, I finalized changes with my lawyer. Everything was documented. Every role defined, no overlapping authority, no vague language. It felt technical, almost boring. That was the point. I also started telling people no more often, not dramatically, just calmly. I stopped explaining every decision. I stopped offering justification before it was requested. Something unexpected happened. People adjusted. Some did not like it. Some tested boundaries. Some respected them immediately. I paid attention to which was which. My parents stayed somewhere in the middle. I no longer felt watched. I felt observed. That was different. The condo sale remained unresolved in parts. There were still missing answers. Still unclear transfers. The lawyer said pursuing them further might cost more than it recovered. Financially and emotionally, I believed him. Not everything needs to be won to be understood. What stayed with me most was not the loss of property. It was the moment I realized how easily other people can decide your future if you let them manage your present. That awareness changed how I show up now. After that meeting, I paid closer attention to how time moved between us. Weeks passed without contact. Then a short message. Then silence again. There was no fight. No final conversation. Just a gradual thinning. Like a rope being stretched until it stops being useful. I noticed how much energy I had spent anticipating reactions, choosing words carefully, leaving space for interpretation. Once I stopped doing that, things became quieter. Not easier, just quieter. At work, I was more direct. When someone asked me to approve something, I read it fully. When something felt off, I said so, not loudly, not defensively, just plainly. A few people looked surprised. A few thanked me. I started sleeping better. One evening, my mother called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded tired. She asked how I was doing. I answered honestly. I said I was steady. She said she worried I was pulling away. I said I was standing still. She did not respond right away. She asked if I ever thought about how hard it is to let go of a child. She said parents do not always know when the line shifts. She said sometimes they keep holding because it feels safer than releasing. I listened. Then I said I understood that. I said I also knew what it feels like to wake up and realize decisions were made for you while you were unconscious. She was quiet after that. She said she never thought of it that way. I did not ask for an apology. I did not offer forgiveness. I let the silence do its work. A few days later I received a final set of documents from the lawyer. They were incomplete but sufficient. He asked if I wanted to escalate. I said no. I asked him to close the file. He confirmed twice. Then he did. Closing it felt strange, not like relief. More like choosing not to keep a door open that only led backward. Life continued. The rental house stayed uneventful. Tenants renewed. Maintenance happened. Money moved predictably. I liked that predictability more than I expected. Occasionally I thought about the condo, not the space itself, the version of me who lived there. The person who assumed things would always be handled with care because family was involved. That version feels distant now. Not wrong. Just earlier, I still see my parents. Birthdays, short visits, polite conversations. We avoid certain topics without naming them. There is a mutual understanding that some lines are no longer flexible. I do not mistake distance for punishment. It is alignment. I have learned that love without boundaries is not generosity. It is exposure. And exposure is not something you recover from by pretending nothing happened. You recover by choosing differently next time. That is what I am doing. The last shift was internal, and it took the longest to notice. I stopped framing everything as a lesson. I stopped asking what it meant about family or trust or control. I focused on what was practical, what I could manage, what I could verify. That narrowed my world in a good way. I no longer give access by default. I no longer assume shared history guarantees shared values. When someone asks for flexibility, I ask for clarity first. When someone offers help, I ask what it involves. These are not defenses. They are habits. My parents adjusted in small ways. They ask before making suggestions now. They wait for answers instead of filling silence. Sometimes they slip. When they do, I correct it calmly. I do not argue. They notice. We are not closer than before. We are not distant either. We are defined. That definition took effort. The missing money remains a loose thread. I know roughly where it went. I know enough to understand the shape of the decision even if I do not know every step. Chasing the rest would keep me tied to a version of events I am finished living inside. I chose not to. That choice did not come from weakness. It came from recognizing where my attention is most valuable. I spend it now on things that move forward. Health, work, quiet routines. The second house is still rented. I visit it occasionally. Not to inspect, just to stand there for a moment. To remind myself what it feels like to own something cleanly. I think about the surgery sometimes. The hours I was unconscious. The way time kept moving without me. That thought no longer makes me tense. It makes me deliberate. I know now that absence creates opportunity. Sometimes for care, sometimes for control. The difference is rarely announced. You notice it afterward. I am not angry anymore. I am not waiting for apologies. I am not keeping score. I am attentive. That is the change. If something like this happened again, I would recognize it sooner. I would ask earlier. I would not assume silence was safety. That awareness stays with me in ways nothing else has. I move through the world slower now. Not cautious. Intentional. And that feels like mine.